I feel the need.
The need for speed.
It's now 40 years since Top Gun became a cinematic hit and a pop cultural phenomenon. The aviation school-based drama, a kind of pop Navy recruitment video, is one of the foremost films of its star, Tom Cruise, featuring a strong cast of actors, an ear-bleeding, cringe-inducing drunk karaoke. It also contained dazzling photographic visuals, both on the ground and in the air, driven by the sensibility of its producers, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, as well as the gifted eye of its director, Tony Scott. But how were those visuals achieved exactly, and why do they still look so good, even 40 years later? Why does the flying look so unique? Actually, why does everything look so unique, and why does it merge so well? The action, the drama, the comic relief. Why is Top Gun such a good-looking film? Before making Top Gun, producers Simpson and Bruckheimer had huge box office success with the action comedy Beverly Hills Cop. Before that, they had made the film Flashdance, a movie in which a talented aspirational youngster wants to get the respect of a competitive elite school. But after watching their close friend crash and burn their career, their more mature lover tells them to pull themselves together with no real villain as a principal character. Now, the duo were making Top Gun, a movie in which a talented aspirational youngster wants to get the respect of a competitive elite school. But after watching their close friend crash and burn their career, their more mature lover tells them to pull themselves together with no real villain as a principal character. Okay, it's not entirely fair to draw such comparisons. One shows the struggles of an unprivileged, young working class woman trying to make it among the elite. The other shows the struggles of Tom Cruise. Both Flashdance and Top Gun featured unforgettable Giorgio Moroder pop songs that won an Oscar. And both were directed like an MTV music video by a British TV commercials veteran. In the case of Top Gun, Tony Scott had a brother, also a director and owner of a top commercials production company, where both had honed their filmmaking skills over hundreds of adverts. Tony Scott became a master of this medium. With TV commercials, directors often had only 30 to 60 seconds to tell a story or create a mood, and had to use every audio-visual trick possible to draw your attention to the screen, and where you were supposed to look, with a lot of attractive and desirable imagery. They're in the business of selling products. With such little screen time, visual storytelling elements, such as continuity, geography, and traditional filmmaking grammar, become much more flexible. Tony Scott's filmmaking career began when he appeared as the star of his brother Ridley's acclaimed 1965 short film, Boy and Bicycle. Basically a silent movie with Tony Scott's character giving spoken narration as an inner monologue. It's a stream of consciousness that finds poetry in truant escapism through a series of striking images in a northern English seaside setting. It was written, directed, produced and shot by brother Ridley, who would then return the favour, appearing in Tony Scott's BFI-funded short film based on Ambrose Bierce's story, One of the Missing. Written, produced, photographed and edited by Scott. This is an effective suspense piece about the horrors of war. Creatively made, with the Yorkshire countryside doubling as a Civil War-era USA. Similarly to Ridley Scott's Boy and Bicycle, it is a largely silent film, where the few bits of dialogue are by characters mostly off-screen. This is all about visual storytelling, a documentary-like use of long lenses, and lots of close-up detail shots, and clever, new wave-inspired montage editing with abstract use of sound. In 1970, Tony Scott made technically his debut feature film, Loving Memory. It has an unusually short runtime of 52 minutes. It's filmed in black and white and is a poem about post-wartime trauma. Once again, it's more of a silent film, with one speaking character who basically serves as an on but mostly off-camera voiceover narrator for the whole film. Scott again showed his aptitude for visual storytelling, with detail shots, long lenses, as well as adding effective use of backlighting, which even his characters are aware of.
Always have your back to the sun was his rule. He always got good pictures too.
And unconventional montage editing, making use of dissolves, intercutting, and abstract use of sound and music. Storytelling was also in the set dressing, which, pertinent to this video, included a giant aeroplane propeller. His storytelling sensibility was a natural fit for short-form commercials. In 1976, Tony Scott did direct a beautiful-looking but very traditionally filmed and edited TV movie adaptation of the author of Beltraffio. In traditional film editing, there is the 180-degree rule, used to illustrate geography in the frame. One person looks left and talks to a person who is looking right, keeping these directions for the close-ups. In short-form advertising, these rules are often broken. A car drives left to right in one shot, and then right to left in the next shot. Intercutting, fast edits and jump cuts are common to help compress time. The experience and style of Tony Scott's many TV commercials fed into his feature film debut, the atmospheric horror movie, The Hunger. For this, he sank his teeth into strong, big-screen aesthetics with the use of widescreen anamorphic lenses. However, the movie is often shot and edited more like a short-form piece, including abstract use of sound and music. Your eyes and ears are constantly directed at all times. Every frame is flawlessly composed and visually appealing, but this approach is quite intense for the length of a feature film. Sadly, the box office wasn't great. Top Gun was born in 1983 from an article read by producer Jerry Bruckheimer about an elite naval aviation school. It was then developed over a period of years, earning the cooperation of the real Top Gun school in Miramar, USA. Scott was hired to make Top Gun based on this 1984 Saab TV commercial. After wrestling with an approach for the upbeat tone requested by the film's producers, he found inspiration in the homoerotic fashion photography of Bruce Weber. Jeffrey Kimball, who had previously worked with both Bruckheimer and Scott, became the film's cinematographer. The movie follows grown-up orphan Pete Maverick Mitchell and his best friend Goose, Navy pilots who save their top pilot friend Cougar during a confrontation with a MiG plane from an unspecified adversary nation. A troubled Cougar subsequently resigns, meaning that their boss, Stinger, has to put Maverick and Goose forward to the Top Gun training school, where Maverick's late father, who apparently caused his own death flying 20 years earlier, also trained. Maverick's dangerous tactics make him unpopular with the other cadets, but he makes an impression with the teachers, not least instructor Charlie. Goose is then killed in a training accident, giving Maverick strong feelings of guilt and self-doubt. Will he graduate from Top Gun and become a great pilot? Let's look at the basic technical photographic style of the film that Scott brought from the glossy world of advertising. Right off, you can see that, as with The Hunger, Scott often uses the extremes of lenses. They're mostly long lenses with shallow depth of field, making you focus in on one area, with everything else falling out of focus. The long lenses also create a compression, with forced layers of foreground, mid and background, and the focus can draw your attention to one of these, with the others becoming beautifully soft. In the busy real locations, camera shake causes the camera to vibrate, which is amplified by the use of the physically long lenses, making them harder for the operators to completely control. There is great energy and excitement as these external forces add extra movement to the camera as it struggles to find its focus and a stable image. Scott also uses some wider lenses very dramatically, but nothing much in between. These extremes give the film a very unique look, one that many commercials directors like and subscribe to. As with The Hunger, Scott used a lot of backlighting, both outdoors and indoors. This adds another powerful layer of separation between the back, fore and midground, taking your eye to where the story is, and it is also extremely flattering to the actors. On one occasion, whilst filming for 3 days on a Navy aircraft carrier, the ship passed away from being backlit, so Scott personally wrote a check for $25,000 to have the ship turned back around, capturing the desired lighting. He later told VH1 that the check bounced. The interiors are lit, or made to look like they are lit, from the existing sources of light seen in the room, chiefly the windows and the lamps. Many windows are cut up with the patterns of Venetian blinds. Smoke is used to create atmosphere, creating shafts of light, adding further separation between the actors and the backgrounds. And backlit cigar smoke looks so cool. There is some extra artificial lighting, allowing you to see detail in the faces, but it doesn't overpower the dramatic three-quarter backlit look. According to Ward Russell, who was the chief electrician on Top Gun, Scott would not move the camera much as he wanted to keep the lights as close to the actors as possible. There are even scenes and shots where the actors are placed close to existing light sources in the film's world, or there's dramatic looking top lighting. Even on the less interesting interior locations, contrast is also created with colour in the lighting, costumes and the production design, or even just through making the actors near silhouette against white and cream. Scott doesn't let any texture or surface go to waste, creating some kind of dramatic contrast. And what's more striking than a silhouette? Cinematographer Stephen Goldblatt, who photographed The Hunger and turned down Top Gun, told Movie Geeks United that Scott was heavily influenced by famed fashion photographer Helmut Newton. There are a few eye-catching scenes in Top Gun where characters pose lit up against real locations, like Newton's flash photos of the 1970s. Close-up insert shots of details are filmed like product shots from a TV commercial. Mirrors were used as part of the set to give the illusion of depth to small locations. For nighttime photography, Scott would often shoot at dawn or dusk, so there was strong contrast between the brightest and darkest parts of the picture. On a TV commercial, you might have a single scene, angle, or even one shot to film, and the perfect weather can be scheduled for this. For example, an entire story might take place in one location with a handful of shots. On a feature film schedule, where pages of dialogue and story must be photographed on a specific number of days with a deadline, it's not always possible to film at the ideal times of day, so cinematographer Jeffrey Kimball had to make any striking dramatic look consistent across the whole scene. Polarizing filters were used to darken the skies to a deep blue, while sunset grad filters were used to heighten the golden dusk or dawn appearance. These were coloured pieces of glass placed in front of the camera lens and not added in post-production. They had to be planned and the filmmakers had to commit to their use, as once photographed, their effect was irreversible. Scott had used grad filters on much of his previous work. Sculptural frontal hardlight is used during the beach ball scene to show off the physiques of the young men. However, scenes do appear unusually grainy, off-colour and overly contrasty. According to Val Kilmer in Danger Zone: The Making of Top Gun, during the physical processing and development of the 35mm film in the photo laboratory, this scene was incorrectly handled. He was aware of this because it was the excuse given as to why his sexy torso didn't make the cut. Scott would also use techniques such as undercranked slow motion and jump cuts to punctuate moments. So that's the overall photographic look of Top Gun. Of course, the really big visual make or break of the film were the scenes featuring planes. As on The Hunger, Scott insisted on using a 2.35:1 aspect ratio, but there was great concern about using heavy anamorphic lenses. As so much of the dogfighting would involve footage filmed from F-14 planes, there was great concern to reduce the amount of weight attached to them. Kimball told American Cinematographer magazine that a lens weighing 5 pounds attached to the plane would weigh 100 pounds when turning a corner. A decision was then made to use the very recent process of Super 35, which used lighter, spherical lenses. While the anamorphic format uses the full height and almost twice the size of a film negative, Super 35 uses only about 2mm extra horizontally, enabling for a 2.35:1 composition. For the aerial photography, F-14 planes were used for those of the film's young pilots, with 3 cameras placed on one of them. A4s played the Top Gun teacher planes. F5s became the fictitious MiG-28s. These villain planes were coated by the film company in a peelable black rubberized paint so they wouldn't have to be repainted in camouflage colours at the end of production. It cost the film company up to $7,600 an hour for up to 6 planes in the air. To film shots outside of the aircraft from the air, pilot Clay Lacy was hired, using his Astrovision system. This was basically a Learjet which flew alongside the planes with a periscope underneath and a top that could pan 360 degrees. The Learjet could only go at 290 knots, so the F-14s had to move slower as they would tend to separate from the camera plane. According to Clay Lacy, Astrovision could only use a 50mm and 70mm lens, with no option for longer telephoto filming. Still, these lenses were long enough to cut with the rest of Scott's style of photography. Now, to film the planes from the ground was going to be a huge challenge. The aircraft were high up, so it just meant that they could only really be filmed from below by cameras looking far upwards. While such shots were necessary, even with the longer lenses used on the production, it was going to be quite a task to create a variety of interesting shots. To solve this issue, a cine sextant system was rented from Vandenberg Air Force Base. It was used to track the flight of missiles high up in the sky. The system is a mechanical turret on wheels, designed and first manufactured in 1963. An operator manned the machine using a telescope as a viewfinder, operating a rack of 6 35mm cameras, which could move 360 degrees and was hydraulically elevated. It weighed 6.5 tons and was flown by helicopter to a 4,000-foot mountain precipice in Nevada. The cine sextant was perched so far off the ground that it allowed the planes to fly directly towards and over the cameras. Communication between the pilots and the film crew to align the aircraft and cameras happened through the use of military walkie-talkies and survival mirrors. In great contrast to the Astrovision system and its longest lens being merely 70mm, the cine sextant camera's focal length went up to 4,800mm. At the base of the precipice was a ground crew with 3 cameras operated manually. All of the film's aerial shots were storyboarded in advance by Tony Scott, who would run them by Lieutenant Commander Robert Rat Willard before they were choreographed at briefings. Generally, to achieve the shots required to adequately tell a story visually, it was found that the planes needed to fly lower, slower and closer together than they normally would be. This was all helped by the compression of the long lenses. The production photographed one real missile launch from an F-14 plane, which was filmed from multiple angles for the film's climactic dogfight. The missile, of course, was totally unarmed, meaning it could trail across the sky, but it couldn't hit a plane or explode. For the explosions, other missiles launching from the planes, and other extremely dangerous shots of plane flat spins, the visual effects company USFX were engaged to create totally photoreal shots that could be integrated with the real plane footage. USFX had previously created miniature sequences in a similar style for the movie The Right Stuff, and 95% of their work on Top Gun would be created using scale models. All of these miniatures would be photographed in camera, outdoors against a real sky, or an outdoor sky backing when the weather didn't quite match. Miniature missiles were launched electronically using a hardwire ignition system and fired into a net. To match the violent camera movement seen in the cockpit and real aerial photography, a power drill with an offset spinning wooden disc was attached to the front of the camera filming the models, creating fast vibrations. When filmed at the high speed needed to scale miniature photography, then played at 24 frames per second, this shake would appear to match the vibration seen in the live action. Because of the long lenses used by Tony Scott, the planes were rarely ever totally in frame. Replicating this look on the miniatures gave USFX the benefit of not needing to hang the models on wires, but on sturdy frames that made them much easier to film. Not everything could be filmed live on outdoor miniature sets. Attempts were made to create miniature tracer fire practically using pellets, but they were abandoned in favour of hand-drawn animation, added optically. This made sense, as animated tracer fire would have to be composited over real aerial footage of the F-14s. So animating all of the tracer fire optically would maintain consistency across all shots. There were a few more optical effects required for the film. The very quick Sidewinder missile shots, which only lasted for a few frames, required 2D artwork and combined 2 to 10 elements in total, adding smoke, tail flames, highlights and streaks. Some higher technology and computerization was also required. For the various plane targeting systems, animators had to rotoscope the aircraft by hand, and then a computerized motion control system was used to repeat the movements, making the hand-drawn target display graphics lock onto the planes exactly. In-camera forced perspective was used to make Maverick's plane begin his famous inverted dive against a MiG-28. The two planes were actually some distance from each other, but through the camera lens, they appeared to be much closer. A simple optical split screen put the two separately filmed cockpits opposite each other. According to Cinefex, Modern Film Effects in Hollywood produced the opticals, although Cinema Research Corporation accredited in the movie. So the plane action was uniformly spectacular and appears very photorealistic. But what about the flying shots of the film's airborne characters? With much publicity, the cast was sent up for a few trips as passengers aboard the F-14s. Aside from a few wide-angle back-of-the-head shots, which might have been the real pilots, none of this footage seemed to be included in the final film. Only the enemy fighters, played by real Top Gun teachers, are noticeable in the movie. The cockpit shots of the main actors were filmed against a rear projection screen, with some front-projected elements by the company Hansard. Interactive lighting helped integrate these shots with the real aerial and miniature footage, creating a very effective illusion. A rotating Panatate camera rig was used to simulate a spinning motion. The backgrounds were filmed on large format VistaVision plates, so have very little visible film grain. Matching Scott's use of longer lenses and use of a wide aperture, the backgrounds are incredibly separated from the actors and barely visible. And this brings us to the most unfortunate part of filming Top Gun. The movie's most potentially dangerous filmmaking was handled without any reported casualties by the real Navy aerial team. Sadly, it was a civilian working independently, creating the film's least life-threatening imagery, where the filmmaking took a fatal turn. Veteran movie pilot Art Scholl filmed the VistaVision aerial plates used for the rear projection near Carlsbad, California. He wasn't piloting a Navy aircraft, but a Pitts S-2A biplane. According to the Aviation Investigation final report, Scholl entered a flat inverted spin before saying the words via radio, "I have a problem. I have a real problem." Ironically, Scholl was apparently photographing footage for Goose's fatal flat spin. His body was never recovered. In the finished film, the background is barely seen in favour of very effective close-ups of the actors. They could have just used a still photo of the sky taken from the ground, or created the background using scenic artwork, but it was impossible for anyone to know that at the time of filming. Now, let's look at how all of this very pretty photographic style works narratively on Top Gun. The film begins going from dusk till night. The entire debrief scene with Stinger has a kind of backlighting in every shot, which makes everything look fetishized and cool, but it also brings out the texture on the sweat globules. The emphasis here is on tension. Once at Top Gun, the skies become deep and blue. The film becomes brighter and more colourful with the hope of Maverick's success at the school. There is a lot of top lighting in these largely windowless spaces, which emphasises confrontation and friction between the cadets. When Maverick buzzes the tower and ends up in trouble with mentor figure Viper, the light behind the Venetian blinds becomes more focused, darker, and more dramatic. It's here that we are first introduced to the memory of Maverick's father. When Maverick successfully asks Charlie out, the light is bright, cutting through the school's Venetian blinds. As things become more romantic with Charlie, we see imagery from commercial photography that made its way into Scott's The Hunger, such as billowing curtains and netting. Slight degrees of shadow are used to represent and emphasize the darkness or light within Maverick, the feelings felt within about his father that he confides to Charlie. Around this time, we start to see period cars and a diner with elements from the 1950s and 60s. Of course, these were very highly retro-fashionable in the mid-1980s, but their placement matches the use of songs from the late 50s and early 60s. Ultimately, these period details evoke the memories of Maverick's mother and father, who died in 1965 and just afterwards. Charlie also drives a period 1950s car, which further strengthens Maverick's bond with her, making her feel as nostalgically romantic as the memories of his parents. This is more to do with production design, but it adds to the visual, emotional experience. The film is probably its most colourful and saturated when Goose's family appear. The outdoor light pouring through is very bright, again blowing out the Venetian blinds. It's a happy time. Charlie is then standoffish with Maverick before his peers at a top-secret briefing lit in steely blue light. After confiding her secret feelings for him, this blue hue is then followed over in their lovemaking scene, making it feel even more intimate and secretive. Practical reasons dictated the silhouetted look of the scene, as it was filmed in post-production when the actors had moved on to other projects. But inarguably, it's now a pretty iconic moment. The film takes a shift when Goose dies. Maverick's internal struggle rises and the cinematography gets higher in contrast, with more shadows and darkness. At ground level, less of the sky is shown because it's a place that has become ruined in Maverick's mind. Now, for a film in which lighting is often put forward ahead of camera movement, Maverick's Board of Inquiry trial, in which he is acquitted, is a scene executed as two very elaborate narrative camera moves, moving into his face and mind. The choice of colours also become colder in this aftermath. Sunset graduating filters are replaced with steely blue graduating filters. When Maverick feels most lost, we see him walking across a runway. The background is so blurred, matching how he can't comprehend the fear and confusion of what he is going through. Maverick and Charlie then meet at a bar where everything becomes dark, mirroring Maverick's situation. It goes beyond the lighting, as both of them are now wearing black clothes. It's funeral-coded attire, not just for Goose, but for Maverick's career and his relationship with Charlie. When Maverick seeks guidance from Viper, the film reflects this re-injection of hope. This is illustrated in a particularly impressive outdoor tracking shot that begins with Maverick and Viper walking away from the camera, filmed with the deep dark sky of a polarizing filter, but it cuts on action to them in the foreground, and a spectacular view of the bay behind them. Filmed with a warming filter, it's a dolly move and zoom out at the same time. It's not natural looking, but it shows the warm transition to Maverick learning the truth about his father, whom Viper tells him was actually a hero. It visually shows the protagonist being moved back into the direction that he needs to be in. The movie keeps this transition back to warm colours during the climax as things become gradually happier and more hopeful, leading to the optimism of the film's ending. If I am being honest, I think the film's spectacular aerial work is often chaotic and barely comprehensible, but it always looks cool and striking, matching the pop aesthetic of the rest of the movie. Additionally, because the cutting is so quick, the shots so tight of both the planes and their pilots, and the sound muffled, that what it loses in comprehensibility, it more than makes up for in an impressionistic hyper-realism. You get the very broad strokes of the aerial scenes. Things fly, things explode, but they don't really matter, because the film is about people. When I think of the movie, what I really remember is the tension between Maverick and Iceman, the sex scene, Goose's death, and that's why it works. A lot of emphasis in film directing is put on the child prodigy ideal of a film director, making it big when they are younger. The truth is, like many skilled artists, filmmakers often evolve with experience and collaboration. I think it's really obvious when you watch Top Gun back-to-back with Tony Scott's debut movie The Hunger that he was still learning the craft of long-form filmmaking. In feature films, you have more time, and the emphasis is generally on actors and their performances. There isn't the countdown of 30 to 60 seconds. Characters have arcs, and the world has to breathe, giving a reflection of humanity. While I never think Tony Scott completely shifted his short-form commercial sensibility, I do think that as he became more experienced, he evolved, and not just in the visuals department. On Top Gun, a lot was created during editing, with the producers and editors very involved in the storytelling. Some scenes were completely created during post-production, such as the famous love scene. Scott was seemingly open to this process, and I think it led to him becoming a better long-form filmmaker. And on the other hand, he brought a lot of much-needed and copied innovation into the world of long-form filmmaking. And it doesn't end there. In 2022, 36 years after the original film, the sequel, Top Gun Maverick, came to cinemas. The aesthetic DNA of the 1986 movie was proudly all over it. Top Gun Maverick is arguably a superior sequel, but it also had the benefit to build on a world and style that it chose to lovingly recreate nearly 40 years later. It's a testament to the strong visual look that Top Gun received from its filmmaking team. Not least of all from its director,